All right, everybody. Welcome back to the MedTech Jam Session with Chris and Mike D. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, my co-star, he is the star. I'm just kind of maybe his partner in crime. Chris Lyons sadly has the flu. We won't go into the details of what that looks like, feels like, or sounds like, because I think we all know. But Chris, if you're listening, I hope you feel better soon. If you don't feel better by the time this airs, then we've got bigger problems. Anyway, keeping our focus and our theme of interviewing experts in the field, entrepreneurs who have been in the arena, who have been fighting the good fight, have been creating value for patients, for investors, for themselves, but mostly for patients because of their expertise. We're super excited to introduce a really exciting technology in the world of shoulder repair. We've had a lot of companies here lately around the shoulder, which tells you that there are still a lot of unsolved problems in the shoulder. And so I'm super excited to have the CEO and the CTO, co-founders of Tetrous, Andy Carter and Brad Pratt, jump in. Gentlemen, how are you?
Mike, doing great. Very good. Happy to be here.
Well, we're super excited to have you. I don't know if you've ever done a podcast before or been introduced to a round of applause like that on a podcast, but thank you so much for hanging out with us or hanging out with me today and talking about Tetrous. But first, I'd like to hear a little bit about Andy and Brad, your journeys in med device, in orthopedics, and what led you up to the point of starting Tetrous. Maybe we start there. So Brad, why don't we start with you, and then Andy will let you tell your quick story.
Yeah, thank you. Really a pleasure to be here and chat with you about this. My background, quite an interesting story. I grew up in South Africa. I was born and raised in Johannesburg and moved to the States when I was 16. My dad was a Chicago native who had then moved to South Africa to marry my mom, and a lawyer, Northwestern graduate. So I jumped out of the country in 1976, as things were starting to come to a head with the Soweto riots and all of that going on. I had the opportunity to leave and actually went straight into university. I do not have a high school diploma. So if I say something stupid, then it goes back to education.
You'll fit right in.
I do have a PhD in electrical engineering. So I started university at 16, and I worked the first part of my career working in START treaty verification. START treaty just ended. That we don't have a arms reduction treaty in place right now with Russia, but I was involved in that early in my career, imaging technology for looking at counting warheads and that sort of thing. And it morphed into medical imaging and was responsible for bringing one of the larger preclinical imaging platforms, micro CT, microspec, micro Patt, to market. And met some guys that were a customer involved in orthopedics, and they asked me to help get a company started, and with some ideas around bone graft, and introduced me to 5 surgeons that were interested in forming this new company, which was called Theracell. And one of those surgeons recognized me. He was a classmate from grade 1 through high school in Johannesburg, South Africa.
That is amazing.
That was Frank Phillips, a very well-known spine surgeon at Rush. Yep. So Frank has a better accent than I do, but Andy will make up for that when he speaks. But Frank recognized me, and so there was essentially no due diligence. We grew up together, we played soccer together. It's like, let's go start a company.
Right.
And Theracell was moving along with a couple of technologies, and that was, I think, in 2008 or 2009. So that's when I got involved in orthopedics. And we had sort of got to a point where we were running out of capital. Andy had joined the company to help us from technology perspective. Mm-hmm. And Andy and I decided to stick around. We got some very good data back from a study we were doing, and we're able to restart the company and re-engineer it. And, since then, Andy and I have been working together in Theracell, which we sold in 2022 to Isto, and a skincare company that also spun out of Theracell, and Tetrous. But not to take all the time here, let me turn it over to Andy to go from there.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Yeah, so I'm originally from the UK, and I did my degree, PhD stuff there. And in 1982, joined a company called Smith & Nephew in the medical space. So I did about 21 years at Smith & Nephew. Mike, you did a similar amount of time. And I think we overlapped for about two years in the middle of that.
Yeah, sounds like.
But I was at Smith & Nephew before they were into orthopedics. And then in 1987, they acquired Richards Medical, Dionics, and Donjoy. And at that point, I was given the opportunity of setting up and running the R&D program to support those three businesses. And that was in the corporate R&D group. So that was a blank canvas, a really exciting time. We set up programs in tissue engineering, joint ventures, doing tissue engineered cartilage, meniscus, rotator cuff, ACL, various things, and then got into all sorts of other bits of sports medicine and orthopedics. And so I did that for a few years till I decided I wanted to get closer to the business and close to working with surgeons. So I came to the US in 2000 to Smith & Nephew's sports medicine division and headed up the R&D there for all the implants and sports medicine stuff, and had a lot of great fun there. But then I was enticed away into the world of startups. And in 2003, I went to a startup called SpineWave and ran the half of the company that was developing a nucleus replacement technology. And I got that into the clinic in Germany, Switzerland, Australia, and then eventually in the USA. Learned a lot about dealing with the FDA, with new technologies and new indications. And basically the FDA finds it very difficult to deal with new things. And if you give them a new technology and a new indication, then it just gets very difficult. They've got no checklists to go through for anything. So it becomes a real battle. But I learned a lot there. Left SpineWave, did about 3 years at Anika Therapeutics as CTO. We acquired Fidia Advanced Biopolymers and the HIAF technology. I then, around the time of that acquisition, took the opportunity to leave them and set up my own company. And that company was a consultancy, although it actually ended up becoming more of a provider of innovation services, setting up virtual R&D organizations and virtual R&D groups. And Theracell was one of my customers there. So I got involved with Theracell, but then got so involved with it that most of the other stuff I was doing just went away. I still did a few other things, but Theracell became the main gig. But I spent some time with Biorez at the founding of Biorez and the sort of development of the BioBrace product. And I still work as a consultant with ConMed, helping them. They've done an amazing job of acquiring that technology and allowing it to develop, and it's been very successful for them. So that was
that was a great exit for Biorez, and it's a great technology. In many places around the anatomy, it's not just the shoulder, it's the Achilles, it's the knee. It's probably got multiple applications. Yep. So then you guys, where did you two converge? And then how did the concept around Tetrous emerge from that?
Yeah, so we were involved in a number of different technologies in Theracell. And when we realized that we were approaching the time where we could look for an exit, I know Andy's been involved in several. I've had 3 successful exits in my career. We had a lot of experience with that, as some of the exits I had done, and Andy's been involved with, companies that had multiple technologies, knowing that an acquirer would take everything, but not really give you value for everything. It made sense to spin out those technologies beforehand. Mm-hmm. We were developing a very unique demineralized fiber. The world was transitioning from demineralized bone matrix with excipients to fibers, which have, in addition to the osteoinductivity of the DBM, it also has osteoconductivity. Mm-hmm. And so we had developed with Nelson Scarborough, who was, I would say, the third blind mice in Theracell, along with me and Andy. We had developed this unique technology and a number of procedure-specific implants for spine. And Andy had an idea about how this could be exploited beyond bone in the musculoskeletal system at the bone-to-tendon interface. And so we had done a little bit of work on that. We had worked with a couple of well-known surgeons on exploring that opportunity. So we spun that out probably about 2 years before we approached the market to look for an exit for Theracell. Mm-hmm. And then it just sort of sat there for a while until we had executed the sale of Theracell. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I mean, ISO Biologics, fantastic partner. We're just really happy about how that worked out with them. Really good guys, and they've done a great job exploiting that Theracell technology. But we immediately started up. Nelson had gone with Theracell to ISO Biologics, and we needed a 3-member team. We really operate less of a hierarchy and more of a, we all do different things. Mm-hmm, and right. So we brought John Bojanowski in. Andy knew him from Smith & Nephew. And so we started up. We have a cap table that it was shareholders that, for the most part, 70% are the same as the Theracell, happy with that exit and, have been happy to invest alongside us. We always participate ourselves. So, yeah, that's sort of how we got going from, business perspective.
Hi, everybody. Mike Donahue here. As a MedTech leader, you know how important it is to hit the ground running when your new product clears FDA. You need to quickly align and equip your field sales team with training, customer targeting, sales assets, and operational resources that will maximize revenue and traction. Well, at Convey Med, we have the app for that. Convey Connect is the mobile-first launch operating system that ensures your field team is clinically confident, culturally aligned, and operationally efficient from day one. With your customized, white-labeled Convey Connect app, your reps can train on the go, access agentic AI to identify ideal customer targets, query AI agents to provide intelligent answers to clinical and technical questions from your customers, communicate and engage with both company leadership as well as your teammates in the field, and then just so much more. So if you are interested in learning more about Convey Connect, go to our website, conveymed.io, where you can book a demo and we'd be happy to take you through the app. And now back to the show.
Oh, no, Andy, maybe you can talk a little bit more from a technology perspective.
Yeah, so the base material is the demineralized bone fibers we developed at Theracell. But I was looking in the literature and I saw some papers talking about using DBM in various forms to re-stimulate the enthesis where the bone meets the tendon. And these studies, which were all preclinical studies, showed that using DBM, you could get the enthesis to reform. If you don't have DBM, you just get scar tissue, which is very weak and contributes to the number of failures you see in rotator cuff surgery. But studies using DBM powder, great for a PhD student, not something you could give to a surgeon. So basically, the power of our technology with the demineralized bone fibers is that we can make shapes, we can make sheets of material, we can make the specific shapes of the ENFIX device that we now commercialize. And this allows us to give the surgeon demineralized bone matrix material in a form that they can use. And again, that's part of the learning from my time at Smith & Nephew, where it got beaten into me that you have to make it easy for the surgeon to do what they're doing. And you go into arthroscopic surgeries and it's tough. It's I couldn't do it. It's really tough. So you have to make it easy for the surgeon to use your implant. And we first went to Nick Verma, who's a great surgeon at Rush, introduced to us through Frank Phillips. And I went to him with this sheet of material and he just said to me, no, I do not want to be chasing a sheet of material around in the joint. There's got to be a better way of doing it. And he'd seen the fiber anchor product that we developed at Theracell, which is used in the pedicle screws. And he said, can't we use that in some way? So that's what led us to developing this implant, which has a peg and a top hat to it. And so, driven with the input from Nick, we developed an implant. We then went out into a limited launch. We're cautious people. We didn't want to go out and sort of have millions of surgeons using it. We went to 7 surgeons, 4 of them in Australia, 3 of them in the US. The Australian connection, again, came through Theracell. We licensed our technology to Australian biotechnologies, and they were amazing partners. And then when we told them what we were doing with Tetrous, they wanted to be all in. And so they're very enthusiastic and very helpful partners to us there. So we went down to Australia. We got some surgeons using the product there. We had Nick Verma and a couple of other surgeons in the US using the product. And for the first year, we just let them get on with it, use the product, give us the feedback, find out whether it worked or not, and all that sort of stuff. And then after a year, essentially, the data was coming back looking good. The surgeons were very enthusiastic. So we opened things up to a wider audience. And so, I guess it's now about 18 months. We just started opening up the commercialization, got John busy getting surgeons involved. And Brad, you can probably talk better than me to how we're doing with the commercial exploitation. But before I hand over to you, the other thing to mention is that basically, while we went out telling people to use this in the shoulder, our surgeons are finding other places to use the technology and other entheses in the body where they have issues, where they want to get better healing. And so, virtually every week I get a text from a surgeon saying, hey, I've just done this procedure and I have to look it up on Google to find out what the hell it is they've done. But it's being used all over now. We've got people doing glute medius repairs, proximal hamstrings. We've got surgeons using it with anatomic total shoulders for the capsule repair in those. So we're going beyond sports medicine now, even into total joints. So it really is being used all over the body.
That's amazing. It's great to have that pull from the market. That's sometimes that's tough in an industry that we've all been in that is mature. Was there a breakthrough in the manufacturing process of this technology? Is that what led you to be able to create the fiber? It's like a fiber mesh material, and then the process of creating the bespoke shapes. Was there a manufacturing breakthrough that you had to innovate on?
Yes. Yeah, that came from the work back in Theracell that Nelson and I did together. And we worked out how to make the fibers. And it was actually the way of molding these intricate little shapes actually came from an observation when we were cleaning up in the lab. One of the things being in a startup is you end up doing all the work. You don't have thousands of staff doing stuff. So while I've been VP and CTO and whatever, suddenly I'm the technician in the lab doing all the work. So basically, I just noticed when we were washing up all the fiber making equipment that if you had a lot of water flowing around, you could get these fibers to flow anywhere you wanted, and they'd flow really well. So that led us to developing what we call this water-assisted injection molding. So we can make molds and using water and suspending the fibers in water, we can get them to mold into any shapes. And we can make some very intricate shapes. Now I'll say to surgeons, give me a shape, tell me what you want and I'll make it. And I've had surgeons sketch things out on a napkin in a restaurant and give it to me, and I've gone away and I've gone back to them and said, this is what you meant. And with 3D printing and stuff, we can make the molds really quickly. We can get rapid prototyping. I was in Australia a couple of weeks ago talking to some guys. They said, can we make this? And I came back and had some molds, and within 3 days of being back, I was able to show them samples.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think there's also, just backing up a little bit, just to make the fibers themselves. We have patents on that are now owned by Theracell, but we have the license to those exclusively for sports med. And Nelson had developed the initial fiber at Osteotech, which became Medtronic, was on the market on their own, as that patent ran. And as it was running out, Nelson realized that there was a better way to do it. And all other fibers in the market are made by taking brittle bone, cortical bone, putting it on a high pressure mill, and at high speed rotating that mill to cut fibers off, and then demineralizing the fibers afterwards. And that does two things. One, you can't really control the shape of those fibers. All of the donated tissue is different, has different amount of fat retained and other things that complicate that. The fibers end up being curled because of the rotation. And then demineralizing afterwards completely destroys all the native topology of the architecture of the bone material. So what we do differently, and we have a patent on it that carries through to Tetrous, is we demineralize struts of cortical bone beforehand. It's counterintuitive that you would do that. So we take a strut, we demineralize it, and then we can use a low pressure, almost like a cheese grater, to just cut these fibers. We can do that along the direction of the fibrils, so we always know what direction they're cutting. We also have the ability then to control the size, the width, the length of the fibers with that cutting tool. We have very uniform fibers, and because we demineralize beforehand, we're half cutting, half cleaving. So we end up with preserving that native topography, and then taking that into this sort of textile technology and water-assisted injection molding that Andy developed. And I will say Andy has a very good team of people behind him, Ian McCreary and Tom Wilson, and some guys that are really, very helpful in developing that. But, just shifting to what Andy had asked me to talk about on the commercialization, we have this great partnership with Australian Biotechnologies, and Simon Barry and his guys, fantastic. And they also own a tissue bank in Nevada, Origin Biotechnologies. So they became very involved with us. They had been producing and still produce the Theracell products for the Australian market, and they do very well with those products. So they had 5 years of experience with these technologies that are used in both. And so being able to translate that to Origin and get a really quick start, Tetrous had the benefit of, we have a technology that we already had 5 years experience with a manufacturer in Australia and a manufacturer in the US that already knew what they were doing, and we were able to jumpstart. The other thing we did was in Theracell, knowing that we were building the company to be interesting to a strategic, to add to their portfolio and their growth, ability. We never hired sort of back office. We don't have a back office. Instead, we hired a really good group in Chicago called Initech. Initech is Dave Selb and Kurt Cooper, well-known guys, as 10 prior very strong 1099 reps for J&J and others. And so they worked with us in Theracell, and we've just bolted on their full back office, all of their staff that could handle setting up contracts with Millstone and Implant Base and others to handle all of that, logistics in storage and shipment. And so day one, we're just firing off. We don't have to hire people, fire people. Their group bolted on. And we did the same thing in Tetrous. So we saved probably a year or two and a lot of capital in these type of, ramping up early entry into the market with the partnerships with Origin, Australian Biotechnologies, Initech, and others. And then Nick Verma is on our board. He's an incredible surgeon who's also contributed to the development. We also had the benefit of some pioneers of shoulder in Australia, Jerome Goldberg and David Sonnabend, who brought in a lot of people that could help us and helped us, really get to the market more quickly. Still have the help of Gunnar Anderson, who set up the Rush, and Frank Phillips, and all of these guys are really, helpful to us in getting into the market and staying in the market.
Oh, that's a pro move. I mean, you guys obviously have a lot of experience, and those relationships pay off. I mean, entrepreneurship is a team sport, not an individual sport. And so being capital efficient and leveraging those relationships that you already have to save time I'm curious, the concept of an enthesis repair, was that a relatively new concept for surgeons to think through?
Yeah.
Are you kind of creating a market, I guess is what I'm asking here.
I think we are. I think, when we first started talking to surgeons and we first went to a show and we had a booth and we had, the enthesis, surgeons would come up and say, "What are you doing?" And then they'd say, "Oh, yes, I remember the enthesis. I met it in medical school."
That was on my anatomy test.
Yeah. So they knew what it was, but it wasn't part of the vocabulary of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis with their patients. And so that we introduced to them and got them thinking about it again. And when I talk to a surgeon, I'll say to them, when you do a regular rotator cuff repair, you only get scar tissue. And they say, "Yep, we know that." And they know that it's an inferior repair. And then we show them the preclinical data that we've got showing that when you use demineralized bone fibers in our implants, that you can get reformation of the enthesis. You get sharpish fibers, which basically are fibers going from the bone through into the tendon. That's what gives you the mechanical integrity of the enthesis. That's the bit of the biology which is really very clever and very beautiful. And that's what we're to recreate. So it's a story that surgeons understand, and they see it and they understand it. And as we've gone to you go back to a show the second year, the surgeons will come up and say, "Yes, the enthesis." They know what it is. And then the next year they come up and say, "I need to use this implant."
Right.
I think the enthesis has become, tissue regeneration has been a growing sort of interest.
Right.
But thinking of it in terms of the enthesis is sort of a new area, and now it's everywhere. So I think Andy did a really good job. And when you explain it to a surgeon and they understand that they've been getting scar tissue and now they have an ability to not just treat the tendon with a patch, treat the grass, but they can treat the soil. They understand that concept, that now they're treating the soil and they have a chance for the roots to go deeper, for everything to be better. And I think just like thinking about what the product looks like, it looks like this. It has, as Andy said, it has a peg portion, and then it has the patch portion, and it's cannulated. So all three of those things are critical. So we're the only people that are implanting into bone in order for something to happen at the bone tendon interface. And that's critical because we're accessing that bone marrow. The DBF is designed, the fibers are designed to ensure that we preserve all the BMPs. When people think about BMP, they think of like OP1. They think of those, related to bone growth. But bone tissue they shouldn't even be called BMPs. They should be musculoskeletal morphogenic proteins. It contains everything for cartilage, for tendon. Tendon doesn't contain everything it needs to go backwards to bone. But when you think about what happens embryonically and bone attaching to tendon, that's what we're trying to recreate. We start in the bone. We start this process. I only know this because Andy taught it to me. We start this process, endochondral ossification in the bone. We provide, this rich plethora of BMPs that can then produce all of those materials that are required for that interface, a multi-zone interface. And it translates up from the peg into that patch portion, which is fairly large, 8.5 millimeters. For a small size tear, it covers a large portion of it. You can use 2 if you have a larger tear. And now you have all of that biology going on from the bone into the tendon, through the tendon. But we also see tendon thickening. This is not intended to be a very long interview. Just to mention a few things that I for sure think are important to people who'll be watching this, is that we are starting to get some very good clinical data back. And there will be publications this year. They're being submitted. We've seen improved re-tear rates. I have a very busy surgeon in Brisbane who has improved his re-tear rate in his historical data that was 20% to 4%. That's a huge improvement. We're seeing across the board improvements in re-tear rates. And we're also seeing earlier return to work. We're seeing in another study from another surgeon comparing with the historical data with ENFIX, 85% of his patients are back to work or sports at 6 months. Without it, only 55%. So it's going from 55 to 85% is dramatic. We're seeing better proms across the board with ENFIX, and these will be published. So I'm just stating them, but we're seeing proms at 6 months that are equivalent to 12 months without it. So I think the product definitely is making our surgeons very happy. We're just crossing 100 surgeons now using this in the US, Australia, New Zealand. We're in the process of going through regulatory in Taiwan as the next place that will be. And we're at this point around 3,000 implants now with enough data at 6 months, 1 year, even 1.5 years, that we're starting to see real evidence that it works across the board. And so we're really happy with that. So
are patients an earlier return to function or are they seeing a reduction of their pain more quickly? I mean, rotator cuff surgeries could be very painful. Having a rotator cuff tear can also be very painful. Are you reducing pain?
We're seeing both. The pain scores are better, the functional scores are better, and the tissue quality is better and the tissue thickness is better. So it really is, once you're able to load the tendon because you've reformed the enthesis, then that tendon is going to be much more healthy than if it's just scar tissue. So basically, if you listen to what our surgeons are saying, we had a surgeon user meeting a couple of months ago. We just sat at the back of the room, as it were, the virtual room, listening to the surgeons talking. And basically, they were saying things, my patients are a lot happier. Happy patients are patients who are able to get back to doing the things they want to be able to do.
In addition to that, I think we also have clinical evidence in the form of MRIs. So we have several studies where we've been able to get consistent MRIs at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And we have, surgeons saying my 3-month MRIs look like 12 months without ENFIX. We see integration of the tendon into the bone, and we're seeing thicker tendon. So, just healthier looking tissue at earlier time points. So,
What commercial challenges are you seeing? Are you getting pushback on, this is an additional implant on top of what they're already using? Are you getting some pushback on price at this point, or the value proposition that you've just articulated, is that kind of winning the day?
No, it is. I mean, we have the same reimbursement issues that BioRes and everybody else has with respect to getting these done at ASCs, where there's a fixed amount they're getting paid for a procedure. Part of our value proposition is if you're using those other patches, we are less expensive than those, considerably less expensive. We're going to get some of the same value in terms of the tendon repair, but we're going to get more value in terms of also improving at the enthesis where early failures happen. And so, use this and you can actually save money and get a better repair. But it's different in every state, and within a state, every city, and within a city, every contract. But at the same time, it's a little bit limiting, but no different than the others. And, we're seeing very strong growth rates. We grew in the US, we grew 4.5x last year, and we expect similar growth rate this year. So, we're seeing nonlinear growth and we're seeing quick uptake. And we have surgeons who sort of get approval to use it a few times and then they're dormant for a few months and then they come back and they say, my patients are doing great. We're ready.
Yeah. And then they're in, right? They want to do a few, watch them. And then 6 months later, they said, okay, let's make this part of my regular, recipe for rotator cuff. Where do you take the technology next?
And you maybe talk about the ACL.
So basically, ENFIX tack is very useful wherever you're trying to reattach a tendon down to the bone. So basically, anywhere where Arthrex have shown you've got a speed bridge technique, you can use our products. So that's where surgeons doing glute med repairs, proximal hamstrings, total anatomic shoulders, repairing the cuff there, distal biceps tenodesis. It's being used in all of those. But where TAC can't be used is in ACL reconstruction. So we've had a number of surgeons talk to us about, they say, I do ACLs as well. I want to be able to help the enthesis in these cases. So we have a product for the ACL. We're just getting our first cases done with it. And again, we're taking the very cautious approach. We've got 3 surgeons in Australia, and I met with them a couple of weeks ago to get them set and going. And we've got probably 3 surgeons, maybe 4 or 5 in the US, because our surgeons, if they do ACLs, keep saying, I want to be in on this. So there's a lot of enthusiasm for it. But again, we're going to do the same careful rollout, get the feedback, make sure it's working the way that we want it to work. Just make sure we don't need to do any sort of adjustment of anything. But it's a very easy to introduce implant. It goes in, it adds very little to the time of the surgical procedure. And again, as with the rotator cuff case, we don't tell the surgeon they have to do things differently. They can still keep their same workflow, which again is a very important thing. So ENFIX TAC adds a couple of minutes to a rotator cuff procedure. ENFIX ACL will add a couple of minutes to an ACL procedure. And so watch this space.
But Mike, I think, just thinking about the market, there are arguably 1 million to 1.5 million rotator cuff surgeries a year throughout the world, about half of that being in the US. Beyond rotator cuff in the elbow, in other applications in shoulder, in ACL and glute med and foot and ankle, probably 2 million to 3 million a year.
It's a massive.
And we really the patients deserve for this or something that addresses the enthesis, which is the main failure mode or main mode of later developing osteoarthritis, beyond what would be normal. They deserve to have something like this used in their healing. So if you look at the addressable market, it's huge. Pick a price, per surgery, a couple of $1,000. It's an accretive market. Yes, we compete with other technologies for that, like what's going to be used in a procedure, but there isn't anything else that strictly addresses the enthesis. So it's a large market. If you say, well, a quarter of the market really will adopt it, it's a well over $1 billion market for this product on its own. So that's exciting. We think it's being recognized. We've been very well funded. We are doing a raise right now, but we'll probably be oversubscribed as we've been with the others. And we'll see where it goes. But in the meanwhile, we're just trying to achieve happy surgeons, happy customers, and
it all comes down to that at the end of the day, right? To that satisfying your customer.
Yeah, look, I'm 65. I've been involved in a lot of really cool product developments across medical imaging, but this product just works better than anything else I've ever had the opportunity to be involved with. It's just a great product.
Well, it's super exciting to see, and it sounds like you guys are well on your way. Where do you take the company? Last question. Where are you looking to take the company in the next 24 to 48 months?
Yeah, so we have a very aggressive growth plan over the next 24 months. We have been using independent reps, and this year we're hiring 7 direct reps in the geographic locations where we think that'll make the most impact. Our goal is really to just be there more for the surgeons and to help them utilize the product to the maximum extent that makes sense for them. So this year it's all about sort of getting our own reps out in the field with this product in their portfolio, expanding sort of the touch points with the surgeons. And that I think that's very different from the way we've approached it up until now, and we'll see how that pans out. We are looking also to expand globally. We're very interested in a few markets outside of the US where we think makes sense from a regulatory point of view.
Right.
And, and that's it. I mean, obviously we're building the company to be interesting to a strategic, or whether it's private equity or, someone that's strategic in the field. But more importantly, we're just trying to make sure that we have happy surgeons that want to use the product, and ultimately that we affect the outcomes for the patients, which in the end will make the surgeons happy, because when a surgeon says my consultations are easier because my patients are happier,
yeah,
you've done both.
You've done your job. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks so much for joining, and all the best to Tetrous. I'm super excited to see your progress. And where can people learn more about Tetrous if they're interested, whether they're interested in participating in your next round of investment, or maybe they're a surgeon, they're interested in learning more? Where can they go to learn more about Tetrous?
So the best is tetrous.com. It's tetrous.com. And if they want to reach out to me or Andy, just send an email to info@through the website. We have a lot of information. We have a lot of information for surgeons, for patients on the website. And then we can be reached through that. We have a strong customer support that makes sure that we see all of those. Otherwise, we're at, a dozen conferences this year. We've pretty much been at the sports med and shoulder meetings. We're starting to be at the foot and ankle meetings and other meetings, and we're very accessible. So, just reach out a number of ways. We're also on LinkedIn. Andy, myself, all of our team is Tetrous, and we're very accessible. So
great. Well, again, thanks for joining, and I'll probably see you guys in New Orleans at the Academy. Yeah,
we will be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We'll
and
be
good
there.
luck for it. So yeah, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Again for joining the MedTech Jam Session. And sorry, Chris Lyons couldn't be here. Chris, man, you missed a really good one. Had a great time talking with Brad and Andy from Tetrous. So that's going to do it. If you guys check us out wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple or Spotify, and we will see you on the other side. Peace out.